2 years, 4 months, and 11 days. That was the official tally, the one Clara kept tucked away in a dusty corner of her mind, a secret ledger of longing. It was the precise length of time she had been irrevocably, hopelessly in love with her best friend, Maya. And for 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days, she had performed the role of her life, the supportive confidant, the steady shoulder, the keeper of secrets that were not her own but wounded her all the same. Each complaint about Liam, Maya's boyfriend of the last year, was another small, sharp stone added to the pile weighing on her chest. The phone was pressed to her ear, the plastic warm and slick against her skin. Maya's voice, usually a melody that could soothe the most frayed of Clara's nerves, was tight with frustration. He just doesn't listen, you know? It's like I'm speaking a different language. I talk about wanting to go to that pottery class, about wanting to just spend a quiet weekend in, and he hears, let's go to that loud sports bar with all your friends and pretend we're having fun. Clara murmured a sympathetic sound, her gaze fixed on a crack in her ceiling that looked vaguely like a river delta. He's an extrovert, Maya. You knew that. It was the same neutral, carefully calibrated advice she always gave. Just enough support to be a good friend, not enough emotion to betray the hurricane raging inside her. I know. But it's more than that, Maya sighed, and the sound was a physical thing, traveling down the phone line and wrapping around Clara's heart, squeezing tight. It feels performative. Like we're going through the motions of what a couple is supposed to do. Date nights, meeting friends, talking about the future. But the connection. Is it supposed to feel this hollow, Clara? Is this what it's like? No, Clara wanted to scream. It's supposed to feel like the world falling into place. It's supposed to feel like fire and safety all at once. It's supposed to feel the way I feel when you walk into a room. Instead, she said, relationships are work, May. Maybe you just need to have a real, honest conversation with him. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. She was an expert cartographer of a territory she would never be allowed to explore, drawing maps for others while she remained hopelessly lost. Maybe, Maya said, her voice small and unconvinced. I've gotta go. He's back. I'll talk to you later. Always, Clara promised, and the line went dead, leaving her in a silence that was suddenly deafening. She dropped the phone onto the cushion beside her, the soft thud echoing the dull ache in her ribs. This was her stasis. This was the quiet, agonizing rhythm of her life, orbiting a sun that had no idea it was the center of her universe. She felt like a ghost in her own story, haunting the edges of someone else's love life, offering commentary from the shadows. An hour later, her apartment buzzer shrieked, startling her from a daze. She knew who it was before she even pressed the intercom button. Maya's presence was a sixth sense, a shift in the atmospheric pressure of her small world. She buzzed her in, her heart beginning a frantic, familiar drumbeat against her ribs. When the door opened, Maya stood there, a vision in a soft, oversized sweater, her dark hair pulled into a messy knot that somehow looked effortlessly perfect. The scent of her shampoo, something light and floral, like rain-soaked jasmine, drifted in first, a harbinger of the sweet torment to come. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, were shadowed with a familiar sadness. Hey, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. She offered a weak smile that didn't come close to reaching her eyes. Hey yourself, Clara replied, stepping back to let her in. Everything okay? It was a stupid question. It was never okay when she showed up like this. Maya drifted into the living room like a ship without a rudder, sinking into the worn cushions of Clara's sofa, the very spot where Clara had just been dissecting her own misery. She curled her legs up underneath her, wrapping her arms around her knees, making herself small. The easy, comfortable way she inhabited Clara's space was a constant, beautiful torture. This apartment, Clara's sanctuary, felt more like a home when Maya was in it. We had another fight, Maya said, her voice muffled by her knees. The same one we always have. The one about him not hearing me. The one about me being. I do not know. Too much. Not enough. Clara's heart twisted. She moved to the kitchen, her limbs feeling heavy, and began the ritual. She filled the kettle, her movements automatic. Tea was the answer. Tea was the balm for every one of Maya's heartaches, the warm, steaming liquid a stand-in for the comfort Clara desperately wished she could offer in other ways. She pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet, her plain white one, and the chipped blue one that was unofficially Maya's. As the water heated, she leaned against the counter, watching her friend. In the soft, golden light of the living room lamp, Maya looked fragile, her usual vibrant energy dimmed to a low flicker. The charisma and warmth that drew everyone to her seemed to have retreated, leaving behind a raw vulnerability that only Clara was ever allowed to see. It was this version of Maya, the unguarded one, that Clara loved the most. It was also the one that hurt the most, because she knew her role was to patch her up and send her back into a life where Clara had no real place. "He told me I was being overly emotional," Maya continued, her voice gaining a sharp edge of anger. "That I expect some kind of movie script romance that doesn't exist in the real world." Clara brought the mugs into the living room, the steam from the chamomile tea curling into the air between them. She handed the blue one to Maya, their fingers brushing for a fraction of a second. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up Clara's arm. It was always like this. The smallest, most incidental contact felt like a lightning strike, a sudden, blinding flash of everything she wanted and could not have. She pulled her hand back as if burned, her breath catching in her throat. Maya didn't seem to notice. She cradled the warm mug in her hands, her gaze distant. "Is that what I'm doing? Am I asking for too much?" she asked, her eyes finally lifting to meet Clara's. The question was genuine, a plea for validation, for truth. And Clara, the loyal friend, gave her the only answer she could. "You're not asking for too much," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're just asking it from the wrong person." The words were a double-edged sword, meant for Liam, but forged in the fire of her own feelings. She sat down on the armchair opposite the sofa, creating a safe, uncrossable distance between them. A chasm of unspoken things. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft clinking of Maya's mug against her teeth as she sipped. The quiet between them was usually comfortable, a shared language of presence. But tonight it felt charged, heavy with the weight of Maya's unhappiness and Clara's suffocating secret. It was the stasis, the holding pattern she had come to know so well. But even then, a small, treacherous part of her brain whispered that stasis could not last forever. Something, eventually, had to break. She just prayed it would not be her heart, or worse, their friendship. That break came 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday night drenched in a cold, relentless autumn rain. The fight with Liam, the one Maya had described on the phone and in Clara's living room, had apparently been a prelude to the main event. Clara was in her pajamas, curled up with a book she had read half a dozen times, when her phone buzzed with a frantic staccato. A string of texts from Maya. "It's over. I ended it. He said things. I said things. I can't be here. In our apartment. It doesn't feel like mine. Can I come over?" Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird beating its wings against a cage. A toxic cocktail of emotions swirled inside her, a fierce, protective surge of anger at Liam for hurting her, a deep well of sympathy for Maya's pain, and a shameful, undeniable spark of hope that she quickly tried to extinguish. She typed back a simple, solid response. "Of course." "The door is unlocked." 20 minutes later, the door creaked open and Maya stumbled in, looking like a survivor of a shipwreck. Her hair was soaked, plastered to her cheeks. Her mascara had run, leaving dark, tragic tracks down her face. She was shivering, whether from the cold or the emotional shock, Clara couldn't tell. She was holding a single, hastily packed duffel bag. Clara was on her feet in an instant, crossing the room to meet her. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around Maya's trembling frame. Maya collapsed against her, burying her face in the crook of Clara's neck, and finally let out the sob she had clearly been holding back. The sound was ragged and broken, and it tore through Clara with the force of a physical blow. She held on, her hand stroking Maya's wet hair, murmuring soft, meaningless words of comfort. "It's okay. I've got you. You're safe here. She guided her over to the sofa, the epicenter of all their emotional upheavals, and sat her down, draping the soft throw blanket from the back of the couch over her shoulders. This was different from the other times. This was not a minor squabble or a temporary frustration. This was a severing. An ending. The finality of it hung in the air, thick and palpable. Clara went through the familiar motions, kettle on, mugs out, but her hands were shaking. The ground beneath her feet, the carefully constructed landscape of their friendship, felt unstable, shifting into a new, unknown configuration. She returned with tea and a box of tissues. Maya took the mug with trembling hands, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. She didn't speak for a long time, just stared into the swirling steam as if it held the answers to unasked questions. He said I was impossible to love, Maya finally whispered, her voice raw. That I was always searching for something that didn't exist. He's an idiot, Clara said, the words coming out with more venom than she intended. She softened her tone. He's wrong, Maya. Completely and utterly wrong. Maya gave a watery, humorless laugh. Is he, though? Maybe he's right. I keep ending up here. On your couch. Crying over someone who doesn't get me. What's the common denominator in all of this? It's me. The common denominator is that you have a big, beautiful heart, and you keep giving it to people who don't know what to do with it, Clara insisted, her own heart aching with the desperate need to make her believe it. They talked for hours, or rather, Maya talked and Clara listened, absorbing the pain, the anger, the confusion. She helped Maya unpack the tangled mess of the last year, holding up each memory to the light and helping her see it for what it was. As the night deepened and the rain continued its steady drumming against the window panes, Maya's energy finally waned. Her words grew slower, her eyelids heavier. She was curled at the end of the sofa, the empty mug resting on the floor beside her. Her head was starting to nod. You should get some sleep, Clara said gently. I'll get you some pillows and blankets for the couch. She stood up, ready to retreat to the linen closet, to reestablish the familiar boundaries. But Maya's hand shot out, her fingers wrapping around Clara's wrist. The contact was electric, a sudden, searing heat that made Clara freeze in place. Wait, Maya said, her voice thick with exhaustion and something else, something Clara couldn't name. Her grip was surprisingly strong, a desperate anchor in a turbulent sea. This is going to sound stupid. Nothing you say could sound stupid to me, Clara promised, her pulse thundering in her ears. Maya hesitated, her gaze uncertain. Can I stay here tonight? I mean, I know I'm staying here, but I can't be alone. Not even in the same room. The couch feels so far away, her voice dropped to a plea. Clara, can I sleep in your bed? The question hung in the air between them, shimmering with unspoken implications. It was a line. A boundary they had never, ever crossed. Their friendship was built on late-night talks and shared meals and emotional intimacy, but their physical space had always been sacrosanct. Clara's bed was her own, a private island. Clara's mind raced. Every rational thought told her to say no, to gently refuse, to protect herself. Letting Maya into her bed was like inviting a flame into a house made of kindling. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It was everything she secretly wanted. The hope she'd tried to suppress earlier flared, bright and terrifying. She looked down at Maya, at her tear-stained face and pleading eyes, at the hand still clasped around her wrist. And she knew she was going to say yes. She was completely, utterly powerless to do anything else. Okay, Clara heard herself say, her voice a thin thread of sound. Yeah, May. Of course. The world tilted on its axis. The stasis was broken. Clara's bedroom felt different with Maya in it. Smaller, somehow, and charged with a strange, nervous energy. She gave Maya one of her old, soft t-shirts and a pair of sleep shorts to wear, averting her eyes as Maya changed in the corner of the room, affording her a privacy that felt both polite and agonizing. The scent of Maya's perfume was slowly being replaced by the scent of Clara's laundry detergent, a domestic intimacy that made Clara's stomach flutter. She climbed into her side of the queen-sized bed, the mattress dipping under her weight. She stayed rigidly on her own half, a vast, empty continent of sheet between them. Maya slipped in a moment later, her movements hesitant. The bed dipped again, and the air grew thick with unspoken things. The only light was the faint, bluish glow from the street lamp outside, filtering through the blinds and casting long shadows across the room. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They lay on their backs, staring up at the ceiling, close enough that Clara could feel the warmth radiating from Maya's body. It was a tantalizing heat, a siren call to the cold, lonely parts of her. She could hear the soft sound of Maya's breathing, the rhythm slightly uneven, still catching on the residue of her earlier tears. "Clara." Maya's voice was a whisper in the dark, so quiet Clara almost thought she'd imagined it. "Yeah," she whispered back, her heart leaping into her throat. "Thank you," Maya said. "For this. For everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'd be fine," Clara answered automatically, the familiar script. "You're the strongest person I know." "No," Maya said, and there was a new firmness in her tone. "No, I wouldn't. I just act like I am." "You're the one who's actually strong," she shifted, turning onto her side to face Clara. Clara felt the movement, the slight rustle of the duvet, and her entire body tensed. She kept her own eyes fixed on the ceiling, a feat of immense self-control. "What does it feel like?" Maya asked, her voice still a hushed murmur. "When you know it's real love." Not whatever that was with Liam." Clara's breath hitched. Here it was. The late-night confessionals, the soul-searching questions, but this time, the context was completely different. They were not on opposite sides of the living room. They were inches apart, sharing the same space, the same air. Her answer felt infinitely more dangerous. She thought for a moment, letting the question settle. She couldn't give her a generic, greeting card answer. Not now. Not here. She had to give her a piece of the truth. Her truth. "It feels quiet," Clara began, her own voice barely audible. "Not boring quiet, but peaceful. It feels like you can finally take a full breath after you didn't even realize you were holding it. It's not about grand gestures or playing a part. It's about the small things. Like knowing how they take their tea without asking. Or being able to sit in total silence together and not feel like you need to fill it." She risked a glance over at Maya. In the dim light, she could just make out the silhouette of her face, her eyes wide and fixed on Clara. She continued, the words tumbling out of her now, a confession disguised as a definition. "It's feeling seen. Completely. The good parts and the messy parts, and knowing that person isn't going anywhere. It's safety. It feels like coming home." Maya was silent for so long that Clara thought she might have fallen asleep. The silence stretched, taut and fragile. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She had said too much. She had let the mask slip, revealing the shape of her own hidden heart. "Home," Maya repeated, the word a soft puff of air. "I don't think I've ever felt that with anyone." "Not really," she paused. "Except with you." Clara's entire world stopped. The rain outside, the hum of the refrigerator, the beat of her own pulse, it all faded away. There was only Maya's voice and those 4 devastating words. "Except with you." Clara couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She lay there, paralyzed by a hope so fierce it was painful. This had to be a mistake. Maya was vulnerable, heartbroken. She was confusing the comfort of friendship with something more. She had to be. "You're my best friend, May," Clara managed to say, the words feeling like a betrayal of the wild things soaring in her chest. "Of course you feel safe with me." She was trying to put them back in their box, to reinforce the walls she had so carefully built. But Maya didn't let her. "No, it's more than that," she insisted, her voice gaining a sliver of conviction. "With Liam, I always felt like I was on display. Like I had to be on witty, charming, sexy. The perfect girlfriend. When I'm with you, I'm just me. And I've never felt like that was a disappointment." The conversation shifted, meandering through the landscape of Maya's past relationships, each one a different shade of the same unfulfilling gray. She talked about her high school boyfriend, her college flings, and then Liam. With each story, Clara saw a pattern emerge that Maya herself was only just beginning to recognize: a constant, low-level performance, a deep-seated feeling of being misunderstood. At some point, Maya's hand found hers under the covers. It wasn't a grab like before. It was a gentle, questioning touch, her fingers tentatively brushing against Clara's. Clara's mind screamed at her to pull away, to not let this happen. But her body betrayed her. Her fingers curled instinctively, intertwining with Maya's. The contact was a slow, steady burn, a quiet anchor in the dark. They lay like that, hands clasped between them, talking until the edges of the sky began to lighten from black to a deep, bruised purple. Maya eventually fell into an exhausted sleep, her breathing evening out into a soft, steady rhythm. Clara remained awake, her mind a whirlwind. She lay there, feeling the weight of Maya's hand in hers, the warmth of her body so close, and felt a terror that was inseparable from a profound, earth-shattering joy. She was holding the one thing she wanted most in the world, but she knew it was only on loan, a temporary comfort in a moment of crisis. And she feared that when the sun came up, it would all turn to dust. The weekend became a strange, domestic dream. Maya didn't leave. She seemed to have nowhere else to go, or perhaps no desire to be anywhere else. She made a half-hearted call to her parents, assuring them she was fine and staying with a friend. She texted her landlord about breaking the lease she shared with Liam. And in between these logistical severings of her old life, she existed in Clara's apartment, in Clara's space, in a way that felt both startlingly new and frighteningly natural. They fell into an easy rhythm. Clara would wake up first, slipping out of bed while Maya was still a warm lump under the duvet. She'd make coffee, the rich, dark smell filling the small apartment. Maya would eventually emerge, wrapped in Clara's oversized bathrobe, her hair a beautiful mess, her eyes soft with sleep. They'd sit at the small kitchen table, sipping their coffee, the morning light streaming in, and it felt so dangerously like a life Clara had only ever allowed herself to imagine in her most private fantasies. The physical boundary that had been crossed that first night remained blurred. They slept in the same bed each night, though after that first conversation, they didn't talk as much. The silence was different now, less about exhaustion and more about a shared, unspoken uncertainty. They would lie there, sometimes their shoulders would brush, sometimes a foot would touch, and each point of contact was a silent question with no answer. On Saturday afternoon, they were sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by takeout boxes and sorting through a jigsaw puzzle of a starry night sky. It was a mindless, comforting activity. Maya was humming softly to herself, a little tune that was slightly off-key, and the sound made Clara's heart ache with a tender, overwhelming affection. "You know," Maya said, her eyes focused on finding a piece with a particular swirl of nebula on it, "I was talking to Sarah the other day." "From college?" "You remember, the one with the really amazing pottery studio." "Vaguely," Clara said, trying to fit a stubborn piece of black sky into the wrong spot. "Well, she came out a few years ago. She's married now to a woman named Jen." "They seem so happy," Maya said, her voice trailing off. She looked up from the puzzle, her gaze unfocused, as if she were looking at something far away. "It just seems so different. I mean, I'm not into girls, obviously, but I just wonder what it's like to build a life that isn't based on, I don't know, the standard script." The casual, offhand remark, "I'm not into girls," obviously was a punch to the gut. It was a clean, sharp blow that knocked all the air out of Clara's lungs. Of course, this was what it was. Maya was just questioning the patriarchal structures of heteronormative relationships. She was exploring feminist theory through the lens of her own bad breakup. It had nothing to do with Clara. The hope that had been blooming in the dark, secret corners of her heart shriveled and died, its ashes leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. "I guess it's just like any other relationship when it's right," Clara managed to say, her voice impressively steady. She felt a cold distance settle over her, unnecessary armor. Two people who love each other, building a life. The details are just details. "Yeah, maybe," Maya said, turning her attention back to the puzzle, seemingly oblivious to the devastation she had just caused. But something had shifted. A few hours later, the afternoon had grown warmer than expected. The sun, a rare gift in the late autumn, was pouring through the windows, making the apartment feel stuffy. Clara, who was wearing a thick, comfortable hoodie, felt a prickle of sweat on her neck. "God, it's hot in here," she murmured, standing up. She grabbed the hem of her hoodie and pulled it up over her head in one smooth motion, revealing the simple gray t-shirt she wore underneath. It was a mundane action, something she had done 1,000 times. But when she looked over at Maya, her friend wasn't looking at the puzzle anymore. Her eyes were on Clara. And her gaze wasn't the usual, friendly, familiar look. It was fixed, intense. It traveled from the line of Clara's neck down to her collarbone, which was now exposed by the scoop neck of her t-shirt, and lingered there for a beat too long. A solid second. Maybe two. It was a gaze that was analytical, curious, and utterly foreign. The world stopped. It was not a friendly glance. It was not platonic. Clara had seen men look at her that way, with that same assessing, appreciative stillness. But she had never, ever seen it on Maya's face. Maya blinked, as if waking from a trance, and her eyes darted back down to the puzzle pieces, a faint flush rising on her cheeks. She cleared her throat and picked up a piece, trying to jam it into a space where it clearly didn't belong. "So, do you think this piece goes here?" she asked, her voice a little too high, a little too bright. Clara stood frozen, the discarded hoodie clutched in her hand. Her heart was doing a frantic, chaotic dance in her chest. "I'm not into girls, obviously." The words echoed in her mind, but they were now at war with the image that had been seared onto her brain, the look in Maya's eyes. The stare that had lasted too long. It was a contradiction. A glitch in the matrix of their friendship. And it planted a new seed of hope in the scorched earth of Clara's heart. This one was different. It wasn't born of desperate, late-night whispers. It was born of a single, unguarded moment. A moment of pure, undeniable looking. And Clara, who had spent years becoming an expert in the subtle art of observation, knew that you could learn more from the way a person looked at you than from anything they ever said. The stare became a ghost that haunted the apartment for the next few weeks. A silent, third occupant in their new, fragile domesticity. Maya had made no move to leave. She had found a subletter for her old apartment and had quietly, almost imperceptibly, moved into Clara's life. Her toothbrush was in the holder next to Clara's. Her favorite brand of yogurt was in the fridge. Her books were starting to colonize the shelves. They were living together, a fact they never discussed, but that was as solid and real as the floor beneath their feet. And yet, a chasm had opened between them. After that moment with the hoodie, Maya had retreated. Not physically, she was still there, still sleeping in Clara's bed, still sharing meals at her table, but emotionally. She became distant, her laughter a little less frequent, her gaze often far away. She was processing something, and she had locked Clara out of the room where it was happening. The easy intimacy of that first weekend was gone, replaced by a tense, crackling uncertainty. The accidental touches that had once felt like lightning strikes now felt like warnings. They would brush past each other in the narrow hallway and both would flinch, murmuring apologies as if they had done something wrong. The bed, once a space of whispered confessions, became a vast, cold expanse of unspoken questions. They would lie on their respective sides, backs turned to each other, the silence between them thick with things they were too afraid to say. Clara, in turn, retreated into herself. The hope that had flared so brightly was now a source of terror. She was walking on a tightrope, and the slightest misstep could send her plummeting. To protect herself, she began to pull away. She stayed late at work, inventing projects that didn't exist. She would go for long walks after dinner, just to delay the moment she had to return to the apartment and its suffocating tension. She was hiding, and she knew it was cowardly, but the alternative, confronting the terrifying possibility that lingered between them, was too much to bear. She was on the verge of losing everything. If Maya was just confused, just using her as a safe harbor after a storm, then pressing the issue would shatter their friendship forever. The risk was too great. After 2 weeks of this silent, Cold War, the tension finally snapped. Clara came home late one evening, exhausted and emotionally drained, hoping Maya would already be asleep. But she was sitting on the sofa in the dark, the only light coming from the city glow through the window, her silhouette a study in stillness. "We need to talk," Maya said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through the silence. It was not a request. Clara's heart sank. This was it. This was the moment Maya would tell her she'd found a new apartment, that she was ready to move on, that she was grateful for everything, but it was time to go back to normal. Clara braced herself for the impact. She didn't turn on the light. She dropped her bag by the door and walked over to the armchair, sinking into it. "Okay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Maya was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "You've been avoiding me," she stated simply. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. "For weeks. You come home late, you barely look at me. You've been hiding from me in our own home, and I want to know why." The directness of the question stole the air from Clara's lungs. There was nowhere to hide. I haven't been avoiding you," she lied, and the word felt flimsy and pathetic even to her own ears. "Don't," Maya said, her voice sharp with a pain that cut through Clara's defenses. "Don't lie to me, Clara. Not you. Of all people, not you." She took a shaky breath. Is it because I'm here? Am I too much? Do you want me to leave?" "No." The word burst out of Clara, louder and more desperate than she intended. "God, no, Maya. That's not it at all." "Then what is it?" Maya pressed, her voice pleading. "What aren't you telling me? Something happened a few weeks ago, and everything changed. We were okay, and now we're not. Talk to me." Clara's throat felt tight, a knot of unshed tears and unspoken words lodged there. She couldn't tell her the truth. She couldn't say, "It's because you looked at me in a way that made me think you might feel what I feel, and the hope is killing me." She couldn't give that much of herself away, not without knowing it was safe. But Maya didn't give up. She stood from the sofa and crossed the small space between them, kneeling on the floor in front of Clara's chair. The move was so unexpected, so vulnerable, that it shattered Clara's composure. Maya reached out, her hands covering Clara's, which were clenched into fists in her lap. Her touch was warm, insistent. "Clara, please," she whispered, her face upturned, her eyes searching Clara's in the dim light. "Whatever it is, we can face it. We always have. Just don't shut me out." And then it was Maya who cracked. The pressure of her own confusion, her own hidden turmoil, finally broke through the surface. Her expression crumpled, her grip on Clara's hands tightening. "I broke up with Liam," she began, her voice trembling. "And I thought it would be simple. I thought I would be sad for a while and then I would get over it. But it wasn't about him. Not really." She took a ragged breath. "It was about me. I feel like my whole life has been a role I was playing. The girl who dates the handsome, popular guy. The girl who is supposed to want the house and the wedding and the 2.5 kids. And I've been so unhappy, Clara. For so long. I think it's because I've been looking for the wrong thing. In the wrong people." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her temples. She held her breath, waiting. Maya's gaze dropped from Clara's eyes to her mouth, and it lingered there, just as it had with the hoodie, but this time it was not fleeting. It was deliberate. It was a confession in itself. "And lately," Maya whispered, her voice thick with a terrifying, beautiful vulnerability, "I can't stop thinking about you. About being here with you. About how this, right here, feels more real than anything I've ever had." She swallowed hard, her eyes lifting to meet Clara's again. "Lately, Clara. I can't stop thinking about what it would be like to kiss you." The words, spoken aloud, changed the very molecular structure of the air in the room. They were a key turning in a lock Clara had long ago accepted would never open. The dam of her restraint of 2 years, 4 months, and now almost 12 days of silence finally broke. A single tear escaped her eye and traced a hot path down her cheek. The pre-confession, the almost declaration, was more than she had ever dreamed of. It was an invitation. A door creaking open. And she knew, with a certainty that shook her to her very core, that she had to walk through it. Maya, she breathed, her voice cracking with the weight of it all. She felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up in her chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock and relief. She tightened her own grip on Maya's hands, a mirror of Maya's own desperate hold. "You think you've just been thinking about it lately?" Clara asked, a watery smile touching her lips. The sheer irony of it was overwhelming. Maya's recent, dawning confusion versus Clara's long, silent, devoted study. "Oh, Maya." Maya's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Clara took a deep, shuddering breath, the kind you take before you dive into deep water. This was it. The point of no return. She could either offer a vague reassurance or she could tell the whole, terrifying, liberating truth. She had been a ghost for too long. It was time to be real. "I mean," Clara said, her voice gaining a strength she didn't know she possessed, "that I've been in love with you for 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days. The specificity of the number hung in the air, a testament to the depth and endurance of her feelings. It wasn't a whim. It wasn't a product of their recent proximity. It was a history. A secret epic. Maya's eyes widened, her lips parting in a silent, "Oh." The confusion on her face melted away, replaced by a wave of dawning realization. It was like watching someone finally solve a complex equation they had been staring at for years. The pieces clicked into place, one by one. The late-night phone calls. The endless patience. The way Clara always seemed to know what she needed before she did. The unwavering, unconditional support. It hadn't just been friendship. It had been love. All this time. "Oh, Clara," Maya whispered, her voice filled with a profound, aching wonder. "All this time? You felt that way, and you still sat there and listened to me cry about him? About all of them?" "Of course," Clara said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I just wanted you to be happy. If that was with him then, I would have lived with it. Your happiness is more important to me than my own." Tears welled in Maya's eyes now, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of awe, of a deep, soul-shaking recognition. She saw it all now. The sacrifice. The quiet suffering. The sheer, monumental force of Clara's love. "I've been such an idiot," Maya breathed, shaking her head in disbelief. "So blind. It was right here. It was always right here." She lifted a hand, her fingers trembling slightly, and gently brushed the tear from Clara's cheek. The touch was featherlight, but it sent a shockwave through Clara's entire system. It wasn't an accidental brush or a friendly gesture. It was a touch full of intention, of reverence. "You are not an idiot," Clara whispered. You didn't know. How could you?" "I think a part of me did," Maya confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "I think I was always comparing them to you. The way I feel safe with you, the way we can talk for hours about nothing, they never stood a chance. I was measuring every relationship against what I had with you, and they all came up short. I didn't have the language for it. I didn't understand what it meant." Her gaze dropped to Clara's lips again, and this time, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. There was only a clear, undisguised longing. "Clara," she whispered, her name a prayer. "Can I?" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Clara knew the question. It was the question her heart had been screaming for over 2 years. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, her entire being focused on the space between their lips. Maya leaned in slowly, giving Clara every opportunity to pull away. Her eyes were still open, locked with Clara's, a silent communication passing between them, of fear, of hope, of a monumental shift. Then, her eyelids fluttered shut, and her lips met Clara's. The first touch was impossibly soft. It was tentative, hesitant, a question asked in the language of skin. It was just the gentle pressure of her lips against hers, and, for a moment, that was all it was. A universe of possibility contained in a single, chaste touch. Then, Clara responded. She leaned into the kiss, a silent answer, and Maya made a soft sound in the back of her throat, a sigh of relief and surrender. The kiss deepened. It was no longer a question, but a statement. A declaration. Maya's hand moved from Clara's cheek to the back of her neck, her fingers tangling in the short hairs there, pulling her closer. Clara's own hands, which had been resting in her lap, came up to frame Maya's face, her thumbs stroking the soft skin of her jaw. It was not a frantic, desperate kiss. It was a kiss of discovery. It was slow and deep and breathtaking. It tasted of salt from their tears and of a sweetness that was just Maya. It was everything Clara had ever imagined, and yet so much more, because it was real. It was the end of a long, lonely ache and the beginning of something she didn't have a name for yet. It was a hurricane of feeling, but at its center was a profound and absolute calm. It was coming home. When they finally pulled apart, it was only for lack of air. They rested their foreheads together, their breath mingling, their chests rising and falling in unison. Clara kept her eyes closed, trying to commit every sensation to memory. The feeling of Maya's lips, the scent of her skin, the solid presence of her, right here in her arms. Wow, Maya breathed out, the word a soft puff of air against Clara's lips. Oh, was all Clara could manage, her mind still reeling, her entire body humming with a vibrant, joyful energy. That felt. Maya started, then trailed off, searching for the right word. Right, Clara finished for her, her voice full of a certainty she had never felt before. It felt right. Yeah, Maya whispered, a small, wondrous laugh escaping her. God, it really did. She pulled back just enough to look at Clara, her honey-colored eyes shimmering in the dim light. A wide, genuine smile finally bloomed on her face, the first one Clara had seen in weeks. It was like watching the sun rise. 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days, she asked, a teasing lilt in her voice. Clara laughed, a real, full-bodied sound of relief. I might have lost count of the hours. The confession and the kiss that followed had shattered the world they knew, and in its place, a new one was beginning to form, fragile and uncertain. As they stayed kneeling on the floor, foreheads still touching, the enormity of what had just happened began to settle in. The initial, euphoric shock gave way to a dawning awareness of the implications. This wasn't just a kiss, it was a fundamental change in the geography of their lives. I'm terrified, Maya whispered into the small space between them, her voice barely audible. The admission was a stark contrast to the joy of the preceding moments, but it felt just as honest. Me too, Clara admitted without hesitation, her own heart fluttering with a potent mix of elation and anxiety. I'm absolutely, completely terrified it was true. For years, her love for Maya had been a safe, contained thing, a secret she kept for herself. Now it was out in the open, real and tangible, and with that reality came a whole new set of fears. Fear of messing it up. Fear of what came next. Fear of the world outside the 4 walls of this apartment. Maya pulled back fully, though she kept her hands on Clara's arms, a steadying anchor. What does this mean, Clara? What do we do now? Her eyes were wide, searching for a map to this new, uncharted territory. Clara looked at her, at the woman she loved, who was looking back at her with a mixture of hope and panic that so perfectly mirrored her own. I have no idea, she said, and the honesty was freeing. I don't think there's a rule book for this, she offered a small, reassuring smile. But maybe we just take it one day at a time? We figure it out together. Together, Maya repeated, testing the word. It seemed to settle her. Okay. Yeah. Together. I can do that. They migrated from the floor to the sofa, not sitting on opposite ends as they had for weeks, but tucked into one corner, legs tangled together, Maya's head resting on Clara's shoulder. The charged tension that had filled the apartment was gone, replaced by a soft, humming peace. The air felt clean, as if after a thunderstorm. Can I ask you something? Maya said after a long, comfortable silence. Anything, Clara replied, her fingers gently tracing patterns on Maya's arm. That day, when you took off your hoodie, Maya began, her voice hesitant. I stared at you. I know you saw me. Clara's heart gave a little squeeze. I saw you. What did you think? Clara considered the question. Honestly, it confused me. Because just a few hours before that, you said you weren't into girls. Maya winced, a flicker of shame crossing her face. She lifted her head from Clara's shoulder to look at her properly. I was so stupid. I was. I was lying. To you, but mostly to myself. It was a defense mechanism. A shield. Saying it out loud felt like I was reinforcing a wall that I was terrified to look over, she sighed, her gaze dropping to their intertwined hands. The truth is, Clara, I think I've been not straight for a very long time. I didn't know. The idea of compulsory heterosexuality, it's not just a theory you read about in a class. It's the water you swim in. I never even thought to question that I was supposed to be with a man. It was just the default setting for my life. She looked back up, her expression earnest and open. But that moment, it was like a crack in the wall. You took off your hoodie, and it was such a simple, normal thing. But my brain just short-circuited. I wasn't thinking, oh, that's my friend Clara. I was thinking, she is so beautiful, and that thought, that simple, undeniable thought, scared the hell out of me. Because it didn't fit the narrative I had built for myself. So I panicked. I pulled away. I tried to put the wall back up, brick by brick. I'm so sorry I shut you out. You don't have to apologize, Clara said softly, her heart aching with empathy for Maya's struggle. You were figuring things out. Big things. It's okay to be scared. They talked late into the night, recontextualizing their entire friendship through this new lens. Maya saw it all now, how she had always sought Clara's approval above anyone else's, how no romantic evening with a boyfriend could ever compare to a simple night on the couch with Clara, how the feeling she had labeled friendship was deeper, richer, and more central to her being than any romance she had ever known. It was a cascade of realizations, and Clara was there to witness it, to validate it, to hold her hand through it. They made a decision. A quiet, unceremonious pact. They would try. They would explore this new, beautiful, terrifying thing that had sparked between them. There were no grand promises of forever, only a shared commitment to the present. A promise to be brave, to be honest, and to do it together. That night, when they went to bed, there was no empty space between them. They curled up together, facing each other, and for the first time, Clara fell asleep in Maya's arms, feeling a sense of peace so profound it felt like a dream. 3 months later. The morning light was soft and gray, filtering through the blinds and painting stripes across the duvet. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the coffee machine and the soft, rhythmic sound of a knife chopping vegetables on a wooden board. The air smelled of coffee and cilantro and the faint, lingering scent of the vanilla candle they had burned the night before. Clara stood at the kitchen counter, a comfortable, sleepy smile on her face as she diced an onion for the omelets they were making. She wore an old, paint-splattered t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, her hair still messy from sleep. A pair of warm arms snaked around her waist from behind, and a soft cheek pressed against her back. "Morning," Maya mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. She rested her chin on Clara's shoulder, her arms tightening in a gentle hug. "Morning," Clara replied, leaning back into the embrace. She tilted her head, and Maya met her for a slow, sweet kiss that tasted of sleep and coffee. It was easy. It was natural. It was their new normal. The past 3 months had been a journey of quiet discovery. There had been conversations, some difficult, some joyful. Maya had officially moved in, her belongings mingling with Clara's until the apartment felt like a true fusion of them both. There had been a stilted, awkward phone call with Maya's parents, which had ended better than she had feared. There had been the first time they held hands in public, a small, revolutionary act that had made both their hearts pound with a mixture of fear and pride. They had fallen into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. They learned each other's sleeping habits, their morning routines, their little domestic quirks. Clara learned that Maya hummed when she was concentrating and that she couldn't sleep without one foot outside the covers. Maya learned that Clara organized the bookshelf by color and that she made the best tomato soup in the world. They were building a life, not from a pre-written script, but from scratch, with their own unique materials. Onions before 9 in the morning should be illegal, Maya complained good-naturedly, nuzzling her face into Clara's neck. "You're the one who wanted the everything omelet," Clara retorted, laughing. "Everything includes onions." "Fine," Maya sighed dramatically. But you're the one who has to deal with my onion breath. She pressed a series of small kisses along Clara's jawline. Is it worth it? Clara turned in her arms to face her, wiping her hands on her pants. She looked at Maya, truly looked at her. The shadows that had haunted her eyes for so long were gone, replaced by a clear, bright light. Her smile was easy and genuine. She looked happy. She looked home. It's worth it, Clara said, her voice soft with an emotion that still, after all this time, felt overwhelming. All of it. The anxiety and terror of those first few days had not vanished entirely, but they had receded, like a tide going out, leaving behind a shore of calm certainty. They were still figuring things out, and perhaps they always would be. But they were doing it together. The fear was no longer a monster in the dark, but a small, manageable thing they could acknowledge and then set aside. Maya's smile widened. She reached up and tucked a stray strand of hair behind Clara's ear, her touch lingering. I can't believe I almost missed this, she said, her voice full of a quiet wonder that had not faded with time. I was so busy trying to fit into a life that wasn't mine, I almost missed the one that was waiting for me the whole time. Clara's heart swelled. She thought back to the girl she had been just a few months ago, the one who kept a secret ledger of longing, the one who thought her love was a hopeless, impossible thing. She had been so afraid of losing the friendship that she had almost refused to reach for the love. She understood now that sometimes the greatest risks were the only paths to the greatest joys. She had dared to hope, and the universe had answered with something more beautiful than she had ever allowed herself to imagine. She looked at Maya, the morning light catching the familiar golden flecks in her honey-colored eyes, and a profound sense of peace washed over her. This was not a performance. This was not a role. This was real. Then we're both exactly where we need to be, Clara whispered, and as she leaned in to kiss her again, she knew, with every fiber of her being, that she was finally, truly, unequivocally home.